let's get this show. Is this live? Let's get it going.
Okay. Good morning. I'd like to welcome everybody on behalf of the board and the volunteers to the Psychology Foundation of Canada's 14th annual Breakfast for Champions. It's great to see everybody looking so alive and well at this time of the morning. So my name's Leanne Lewis. I'm a trustee of the foundation, and I am honored to be a chair of this morning's breakfast. A personal greeting for Eric. Yeah, and I'm honored, speaking of Eric, I'm honored to be accompanied by a true visionary. Eric is, or was the founding chair of the foundation. He is a very generous and longtime supporter of the foundation, Dr. Eric Jackman. And it's really in no small measure thanks to Eric's commitment to the foundation for close to 45 years that the foundation has been bringing together people to support children to ensure that they have the resilience to navigate the ups and downs of life and thrive emotionally. So as we get underway today, we begin by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Wendat, the Assiniboine, the Haudenosaunee, the Métis, and the Mississaugas of the New Credit. Today, this meeting place is still home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to meet on this land. So on behalf of the board and staff, we extend our appreciation to everyone joining us today, and in particular, we want to thank our very generous sponsors who are helping the foundation realize its mission and who have made this event possible. So we have our presenting sponsor, Dr. Dan Andre, our platinum sponsors, CIBC Children's Foundation and Invicta Investment, our gold sponsors, AGF, BMO Financial Group, EL Financial Corporation, Heathbridge Capital Management, OLG, and Scotiabank, and our silver sponsors, Bell, Kids Run for Nature, Rogan Investment Management, and Mark Smith. And I would encourage you to please all look in your program, as you will see the many other generous sponsors who have made today possible and who also support the foundation throughout the year. And I also want to acknowledge, as our last acknowledgement, is our print sponsor, the Printing House. And so thank you all for your generous support. And I also want to thank the staff and our volunteers and Lovegrove and Suzanne Park, Brianna Leal, Kathryn Eel, and Judy, our CEO, Anita Springate, and Ashley Inslip-Lavoie, without all of whom's effort, and we've worked almost a year on this breakfast would not have been possible. So thank you very much. And now I would like to call upon the aforementioned Judy Hills, the director of the Psychology Foundation of Canada, to come to the stage. And I believe, Eric, you have an acknowledgement.
Okay, Judy. Ladies, folks, thanks all very much for coming. I'm glad the snow held off. Judy here used to work for the Canadian Psychiatric Research Foundation, and she'd done that for many years and taken it from a small organization with revenues under 100,000 or so, or maybe a little more, up to about 3 million. She came to us 12 years ago. This is our 14th breakfast, so you missed the first couple, Judy.
Just the first one.
Huh?
Just the first one.
You missed the first one. She missed the first one. We had about 80 people. But then Judy started to go to work. No, actually, she retired from the Canadian Psychiatric Research Foundation for about 3 days and got bored. Her wonderful husband, Ken's here, and he was still busy as the best principal in Ontario of the school. And Judy said, well, I got nothing to do. I'll go back to work. And we happened to be looking for somebody to be an executive director. And Judy heard about it about 2 days before it dropped in, and we interviewed about half a dozen people. And it was a no-brainer. Judy Hills was the person that we wanted to work with us. And Judy's been working with us all of these years ever since. We now have a breakfast, not 80 people. We have a record-setting breakfast with all of you here. We've now topped 500 people. We moved from the Board of Trade, which is a lovely, lovely room. We're now in the Canadian room, one of the larger banquet halls in the city. Judy? I knew there was something else I had to do this morning, and someone said that I'm supposed to be presenting Judy flowers. So I asked to see if they're flowers. They are flowers. Judy, on behalf of all of us, we wouldn't be here. Whatever the board does and whatever the volunteers do, it's always has to be coordinated, has to be managed, decisions have to be made, and you've been it for a long, long time. And this is just to acknowledge all that you've done and all that you're going to do. Thank you so very much.
I know we're tight on time, but I do have to take this opportunity to say that the people in this room are the ones who really should be thanked. It's been an incredible privilege to work with all of you, and I thank you all and encourage you all to continue to do what you're doing. The messages from this organization, the entrepreneurial spirit shown by the trustees to take on issues before anyone else does, is really critical. So thank you for all your support all these years, because it takes all of you to make this happen, and thank you.
I'll let you go. Yeah. Okay. Yes, that's why this is the breakfast for champions, because you're all champions. So thank you, Judy. As Eric mentioned, our goal is to not only make today's breakfast our biggest in terms of attendance, which it is, but also in terms of funds raised. Today, as some of you may know, is Giving Tuesday. So in addition to considering a donation to the foundation, we encourage you to participate enthusiastically in the silent auction. Hopefully you saw it when you came in. There are 35 wonderful items at a variety of price points. Many items come ready with gift wrap and things, so it's really makes it easy if you want to give it for a gift. However, it makes a great hostess gift also, and of course, you can always buy something for yourself. And we just want you to keep in mind that the silent auction is going to close at 10 to 9. And I would now like to introduce you to Dr. Leanne Davey. Another Leanne, we're the two Leannes on the board. Where are you, Leanne? There you are. Come on up. So in addition to being a New York Times bestselling author, a keynote speaker, and principal founder of 3 Cozy, Leanne is a trustee and a longtime supporter of the Psychology Foundation of Canada. And I'm going to turn it over to Leanne to tell you a little more about the foundation.
Thank you. I love the Leanne.
Yeah,
Thanks,
it is,
Leanne. Yeah, okay. Good morning, everyone. So this morning, I have the privilege of acquainting or reacquainting you with the Psychology Foundation of Canada. We've gathered here at the crack of dawn. Actually, you can't tell from this room, the sun might not be up yet, for many, many different reasons. So maybe you're here because you're a parent and you count on the Psychology Foundation to provide support as you raise your kids in this complex, demanding, and sometimes scary world. If so, welcome, parents. Maybe you're here because you're an employer and you depend on the Psychology Foundation to ensure the next generation will enter the workforce with the stress management skills that they'll need to succeed in your increasingly demanding workplace. Welcome, employers. Maybe you're here because you're one of our funders, and you're proud to celebrate our work and our contributions to the well-being of so many families. Welcome to all of our funders. Maybe you're here because you're an educator or work in public or mental health, and you rely on the support of the Psychology Foundation as a partner to bolster the services of our public system. Welcome to our partners. And maybe you're here because the breakfast looked better than the one down the hall, and if so, welcome breakfast crashers. No matter why you're here, you are in the right place and you are among friends. For 44 years now, the Psychology Foundation of Canada has been nurturing resilience in kids. That is a long history of developing and delivering psychological tools and resources that help kids thrive emotionally. We've been delivering those tools when and where they're needed to make sure that children grow up with the skills to support their own well-being. We are there from birth, quite literally, to the very last day of childhood. We are there from the classroom to the conference room, from the inner cities of Toronto to the most remote fly-in communities of Canada's north, from the Wiagamo First Nation, whose people have been here for tens of thousands of years, to the clients of the Punjabi Community Health, who have been here less than 1 year. We are inspiring, teaching, and empowering kids and the people who care for them. The Psychology Foundation, though you would never guess from being in one of Toronto's largest banquet halls with 500 people, you might not guess, the Psychology Foundation has a paid staff of 3. We have trained, with that paid staff of 3 and many generous volunteers, we have trained 15,000 facilitators across this country, who in 2018 alone reached 174,000 kids. Yeah. In many different ways. We help parents create bonds with their infants that promote healthy brain development. Parents like Marjorie, a new mother who told us she hadn't been talking to her infant because she didn't think he could understand. We teach coping skills to young school-age children, their parents, their caregivers, and their teachers. And one of those teachers knew we were getting through when her 5-year-old student told her that, "Miss, you need to take a deep breath. You look stressed." He said he learned that at Kids Have Stress Too in his daycare. We build increasingly sophisticated stress management skills in adolescents and teenagers just as they need them the most. And as a parent of a 16-year-old and a 12-year-old, I understand this. And we know kids want these programs. We know from the youth in Kawartha Pine Ridge who not only participated in the full stress lessons program at school, but then commandeered their local community center and put on a stress fair attended by 300 members of the community. And we now reach out to organizations, employers, to offer programs that allow companies to assist and support their working parents with content from all of these programs. All of our programs, no matter where they're delivered or what age group, have 3 things in common. First, we focus on health promotion because we need the coping skills to be there the moment kids need them. In the moments of stress or uncertainty or concern, they need to already have the tried and true approaches to help themselves to feel better. Second, our programs are designed based on the latest research because common sense doesn't always work. We need to understand the factors that contribute to wellness so we can focus on the most important ones at every stage of development. And third, our programs are clinically evaluated and the findings published in peer-reviewed journals because we can't afford to use hope as a strategy. We need our money and our efforts focused on what actually works. We have built incredible capacity and partners across the country so that this small but mighty organization can reach Canadians wherever they are. But don't take my word for it. The Donner Foundation, who recently rated the Psychology Foundation in the top category of all Canadian charities for income independence, strategic management, innovation, program costs, and outcome monitoring. All that with less than 14% of every dollar raised going to operations, including fundraising. So that means when you donate $1 to the Psychology Foundation, 86 cents gets to a kid or someone who cares about them. So let's make that a little more inspiring than that. When you donate $100, cards on the table, that gives $86 to a kid's, or heck, you might as well put it out into the universe. When you give $1,000, $860 makes it to where it counts. So let me tell you why we need that $1,000. Because we're not done. Stress isn't going away. The world is not getting easier. And we at the Psychology Foundation have more work to do. The foundation is turning our attention to the next generation and to the next generation of challenges. At a recent strategic planning session, we looked at the changes that will create the reality for the next generation of Canadian kids. Quoting Yuval Harari in his article, What Kids Need to Learn to Succeed in 2050, let me quote, "We are beginning to see that humans as individuals and humankind as a whole will increasingly have to deal with things no one has ever encountered before, such as super intelligent machines, engineered bodies, algorithms that can manipulate emotions with uncanny precision, rapid man-made climate cataclysms, and the need to change your profession every decade." So we know to survive and flourish in such a world, kids will need a lot of mental flexibility and great reserves of emotional balance. In the language of today's AI panel, they will need the EI skills to go along with all that AI. So I'm pleased to report that the Board of Trustees has committed to the Foundation's next frontier, nurturing resilience in kids in the face of massive technical and world change. In the years to come, with your support, we will be developing new tools to nurture kids' resilience in two important areas. First, building tools for change resilience, because the pace of change is only going to accelerate. And second, focusing on the impact of pervasive technology. Some of us might have to deal with our own issues on the board first. This new focus will complement our already strong pillars of attachment and stress management by adding critical thinking and other areas that children will need support in. But we can't do it without you. So while the amazing psychologists who design our programs donate all their time, your support here today will help us to attend conferences to promote knowledge transfer, to fund our evaluation research, and to disseminate our programs so that no kid will go without just because they can't afford to pay for this. I could not be prouder to be part of this organization, and I hope you're proud to be with us this morning. Thank you so much. Where'd Leanne go?
I'm right behind you. Thank you, Leanne, for that great articulation about the organization and where we're going. And, you know, I do believe that you can tell a person by the company they keep. And when you see Dr. Eric Jackman and Dr. Leanne Davey standing by this organization, I think it tells you a whole lot about the quality of the organization. So now it's time to turn to our topic of the day, which is the intersection of artificial intelligence and EI. And so I would like to introduce to you Dr. Dan Andre, who is both our presenting sponsor today, and he's also our moderator for today's discussion. Dr. Andre was also a founding trustee, along with Eric, and was the vice president of the Psychology Foundation. He currently serves as an advisor on the Psychology Foundation's Health Issues Advisory Panel. And Dr. Andre is well known as a champion for the caring professions and for those who work and benefit from care and service. So Dan, I'm going to turn it over to you to get us going and introduce the rest of the panel. Yeah.
Okay, panelists, come and join me here now, okay? Come on up here and we'll get going, and it'll be a fascinating discussion. You know, actually, you're all in here now and you did a great job getting here. The volunteers were wonderful in directing you here, in terms of the hotel being under construction that way. You know, when I was having breakfast or getting breakfast, somebody leaned over and said, "Getting up here isn't a subtle secret cognitive test, is it? To test our skills." However, we all made it here. And so, yeah, here's our gang up here. And at any rate, welcome everybody. And we're ready for a wonderful discussion. And we're here with our three panelists. But, you know, we're here to have them navigate us through really one of the most pressing questions facing our age and our world. And that is, how do we manage the interface between emotional intelligence, EI, okay, which is a supremely human quality, and that of artificial intelligence. And of course, put another way is, how can we ensure that we remain being human? And how can artificial intelligence help that, and vice versa as well? And so I'm joined here by our three panelists. Hi, Kathryn. First of all, Kathryn Hume. And she is an amazing person. She has a PhD in comparative literature. How you got from comparative literature to AI is going to be fascinating that way to hear. But she speaks 7 languages. She's a partner at FF Venture Capital, which helps companies, a New York-based company, start up in terms of their, their businesses in artificial intelligence. She's the vice president of Integrate AI, an expert in AI and machine learning, and you're a sought-after Kathryn speaker and lecturer. So we're welcoming you today and glad you're here. And then we have Russ Ward. Hi, Russ, sitting over there to her left. And he's the president and founder of Massively AI. You are, Russ, an expert in marketing technology, artificial intelligence, and messaging. You have extensive experience in children's entertainment, which is kind of cool, through your leadership at Teletoon, Family Channel, and the media industry through Bell Canada. You hold an MBA from the Schulich School of Business. Okay. And of course, Steve Stein, who's been a champion for many years of the Psychology Foundation. He's a longtime leader, as I say. His current capacity is as the Professional Advisory Council Chair. You've also been a past president, and you're a clinical psychologist and author of a recently released book. Do you have any to sign here today or no?
I didn't bring one.
Oh, God, okay. All right, EQ Leader, instilling passion, creating shared goals, and building meaningful organizations through emotional intelligence. But I think what's really cool here, actually, Steve, is that you have been an advisor to several TV shows, okay? Including Big Brother Canada, whoa, Amazing Race Canada, this is giving psychological advice and training, Master Chef Canada, Real Housewives of Canada. Toronto, okay? And The Bachelor Canada.
Oh, wow.
And anybody in the audience from your shows? No?
I hope not.
No. Okay. Well, I think, actually, do you think we can actually get this guy to dish the behind-the-scenes dirt of what really happens behind there? I would love to know. But at any rate, I want to mention, too, as well, that the questions that I'm going to ask in a couple of minutes actually are due to the work of Russ, okay, and your company, Massively.ai. Because what happened a few weeks ago, if you gave your email address to the Psychology Foundation, you had a chance to participate in a survey asking you for your attitudes, your ideas, your feelings about AI. It'd be kind of like sending a text message to your good friend, but you weren't talking to a good friend. You were talking to a robot. And that robot not only took in your words, but if we can find out more, Russ, it could actually assess your sentiments, your feelings, the intensity of the words that were used, looking for patterns. So out of all of that, with all these algorithms, you can explain that to us, we come up with a list of questions of things that you in the audience want to know. So we'll carry on with that in a moment. But Kathryn, if I could actually start with you, can you explain to us what is artificial intelligence? How long has it been around? And what are the goals?
That's just a tiny little question.
You have 30 seconds. No, I'm kidding.
So I like to begin with a more psychological definition of artificial intelligence. It's not rigorous, but it's a nice thinking tool. And it's a definition from a novelist from the 1980s. Her name's Nancy Fulda. And she defined it as whatever computers can't do until they can. So if you think about that, it's the definition can do some work for us. So it includes with it our subjective perception of human capabilities versus those of machines. So at this moment in time, Google Maps doesn't really seem like AI. We consider it just a plain old application. Although it's, in terms of the definition in the letter of how these technologies work, it's one of the most sophisticated machine learning products on the market. It's powered by reams of data. There's an article called Google Maps Moats by a fellow on the internet that talks about how Google started collecting the data that fuels Google Maps in 2011 and has a strict competitive advantage over competitors like Apple. But it just feels like plain old technology to us, whereas self-driving cars feel like they're at the forefront of things that computers just shouldn't be able to do and are shocking us and humbling us as it relates to our supremacy over animals and plants and other beings in our universe. And the other thing that's nice about this definition is that it keeps progress is baked in. So something that might not be AI yesterday becomes AI tomorrow, et cetera. So it helps us understand that it's a very tricky discipline to render precise, and we have to bake progress into our definition. But it's not all that useful as we think about us imagining and gaining conceptual intuitions for what artificial intelligence is and isn't. As Dan mentioned, the field has actually been around for a very long time. It was founded back in the 1940s and 50s by a bunch of logicians and computer scientists who, if you've heard about Alan Turing and the Turing test, posed a question if intelligence might not necessarily be something that we examine internally with fMRIs and all the technology we have today, but something that we might just be able to infer based upon our observations of people's behavior. So if I look at Steve and he does something, I don't know exactly what he's thinking inside his head, but I can look at his behavior and his actions and infer what he might be thinking, what he might be feeling based upon what I'm able to observe. And so Turing said, well, can we do that for computers too? So the computer might not actually be smart. It might not be processing information the way that we do with our brains, but if it looks like a duck and talks like a duck, then why don't we just call it a duck, right? So that was sort of some of the early thinkings around our fashioning the idea that computers might in some way exhibit intelligence like our own. On the back end, and what I mean by that is, the programs and the logic that went into creating these technologies, in the 1940s and 50s, they were largely, our attempts to mimic human intelligence started with rules. So we wanted to write out down the logic. If this happens, then that happens. If you see this condition, then do that. And that proved okay to mimic certain human capabilities we qualify as intelligent, but it wasn't great. It was relatively brittle because if you think about it, the world is so massively and beautifully complex that there's only a certain subsection of things that we can reduce down to strict rules. There's lots of other things, like our emotions, like preferences, like sentiment, that are messy and complex, and there's lots of exceptions to the rules. And so what's been happening over the past 10 years is with the rise of the internet, with the rise of computers, with the rise of everybody having a device in every single solitary crevice of the universe, we now are able to collect a lot of data and shift from having us come in as humans and define what we think a computer should do when it's acting intelligently to sort of shifting away a little bit of the locus of control and designing what we call algorithms, and we can talk about that a little bit more, that shape the type of information we might infer from data. And when we do that, we make a big trade-off, and it's relevant for stress and emotional intelligence.
Kathryn, just thinking that brings us to the idea of emotional intelligence. The fact is people are behind it. Steve, how do you define emotional intelligence, and why is it so critical to our human capacity?
So emotional intelligence takes us back way before the AI world,
Yeah.
thousands of years. Something that we've had ever since there were at least two people walking on the earth. And it's really only been written about or formalized back in 1989. But what it refers to, and there's now a number of different theories of emotional intelligence, just as there are in cognitive intelligence. But in order to understand emotional intelligence, it really involves three things. All the different theories encompass at least three things. One is the ability to be aware of your emotions and aware of the emotions of someone else. The second is the ability to manage your emotions and manage other people's emotions. And finally, the ability to use emotions to do things like to motivate yourself, to make decisions, to deal with other people in interpersonal relationships. So in a nutshell, that's really what we mean when we talk about emotional intelligence.
Oh, thank you very much. Russ, whenever you have a transformational revolution like we're having now, it holds the richness of potential and promise, but also of peril and problems that way and pitfalls. But in terms of the positive side of this whole situation of AI, what are the positives that you see? But first of all, tell us really quickly about Chris, just so people know how we came up with these questions.
Sure, yeah. So very quickly, what Chris is designed to do is, in a conversational way, dig a little bit deeper into, I guess, the reasons and the feelings around, opinions. And so when Chris asked, certain questions about what you were interested in, what you were worried about, positive, negative things, and you answered those questions. Chris could detect whether you were giving full answers or partial answers. If we expected something different, we would prod you in a certain way. If we felt that you were taking a bit too long with the question, we would encourage you. And so the design was ultimately to get a little bit deeper, to get the flavor of what it is that people were thinking about the topics that we were feeling today. Beyond that, really the intelligence happened kind of on the back end, to Kathryn's point, around our ability to really find patterns in all of that unstructured data that you were giving us. Everybody was just kind of free texting their thoughts and feelings to the various questions we were asking. We were able to, without any human intervention, be able to kind of detect all of the sentiments, the key topics, the themes. We recognize patterns in everything, so we could pull out, hey, here are the key things, the key topics that people are interested in, and that helped us kind of form our questions here.
And what are some of the positives you see? We use it every day. It's changing our lives.
That's it.
What are 2 or 3 really positives you see?
Yeah, and I think that's ultimately people pointed to a lot of the more pervasive and Google Maps is a great example. A lot of people talked about Waze. A lot of people talked about just reminders and the voice assistants to keep them on track or to manage certain certain functions. So I think from a technology standpoint, people are seeing it, save them time. People are seeing it, help them be more efficient in their activities. There are examples that some people cite it, access to resources. So in this context, and I think when we're talking about kids specifically and helping them achieve kind of healthy mental health. It was about recognizing and getting access, being self-aware in some cases of what those triggers were, that they could have access to certain strategies they could convey to their kids. It's not about, the examples that were cited weren't really about replacing humans. It was about giving people better resources, giving people better access to the tools and strategies that they needed, so they could kind of manage those personal relationships.
Oh, thank you. Well, Kathryn, Chris certainly talked about and responses focused on the positives and embracing technology, but of course also there were people who were concerned about things. We think of what happened in Oshawa yesterday in terms of electric cars and stuff, people losing jobs. But what are some of the pitfalls potentially of all this?
I think one of the problems is, one of the biggest pitfalls is that we tend to focus on the wrong pitfalls. So there's a lot of worry about existential risk. The super intelligent machines are going to become smarter than us. We worry a lot about job loss. I think there's a lot that's going to be around job change, which Leanne mentioned, and sort of are having to come to grip with the type of education, the type of critical thinking skills we need to provide to the next generation so that they're able to sort of context shift a little bit more quickly than the workforce has been adapted to today. But the biggest one, as mentioned, is as we move from building technologies where we get to state the rules and we have a little bit control over how they work to our learning patterns from data, that data carries with it the traces of its history. And often that history is our human history, and it doesn't permit polite fictions like we permit when we sustain our emotional connections with one another and get by in the world. So the biggest example there would be bias. So we're going to build a system, and let's say it's going to be a home robot that will provide some sort of emotional support to somebody in need. Should that robot have been trained upon a data set that only had examples from rich Caucasian males, it'll work great for that population, but it might make infelicitous errors for somebody who just comes from a fundamentally different background. So the sort of richness of the context of our social interactions, of how human society works, tends to be a little too complex for how these algorithms are shaped today, and there can be all sorts of ethical pitfalls that rise in that gap.
Thank you very much. You know, I think back to a cartoon of the 1960s, The Jetsons, you know, where Rosie the robot would clean up things, but we've come a long way since then. Steve, we as human beings like to think of ourselves as supremely emotionally intelligent. Now, I'm not going south of the border with this question, by the way, sorry. However, we sometimes have biases and we make judgments that lead to behavior that isn't necessarily in our best interests. But you know, if you have a machine that can eventually think like a human, can actually engage in a way that results in more effective and better outcomes, what's wrong with that?
Well, there can be benefits. There can be benefits. What happens often, though, is the machines take over the less emotional parts of what we do. They take over the memory, the ritualistic things, the routine things, the if-then types of things. So we haven't yet reached the point where they take over the emotional aspects of what we do. That still requires a human intervention to do those kinds of things.
Yes. Okay, well that's very helpful too. And now certainly the Psychology Foundation is concerned with kids and youth. How can we be sure that our kids are prepared for both AI and EI in this turbulently changing world? And this could be open to anybody.
I mean, I'll go first. I mean, I think obviously our kids are, you know, they're exposed to a very different set of, you know, circumstances than they have been in the past. Screen time is an issue. You know, isolation is an issue for kids because they have everything at their disposal. They can spend all their time. I have a 17-year-old and a 14-year-old, and you know they could disappear for hours into their rooms with no contact. And we know, and again, this one of the foundation's key messages is that having a strong relationships, personal relationships, is ultimately the most important factor. So ultimately it's managing the isolation or some of the things that having access to a screen and virtual social networks versus the need for real human contact and managing those needs. Technology can help in that way. Yeah. By again, Google and Apple are now reporting on how much time you're spending on your screen. So there's a reminder, and again there's and again to Kathryn's point, that's not necessarily artificial intelligence because computers can do it. It's not that aspirational thing, but there's machine learning involved in that, so they can tell you and remind you and make you aware. Wait a second, I'm either spending too much time, or make the parent aware. My kids are spending too much time, on screen or on social or whatever it is, and that parent can then intervene, set, more boundaries, set kind of,
I remember in a previous meeting we were talking about implications for kids, and the story came up of a teacher who was really concerned because the student would answer her in the Siri voice, yeah. Okay, in that way. But I won't do that, I promise. But having said that, Kathryn or Steve, anything to add to? Yeah, Steve.
Just want to say, I think it's about balance, really. It's about balancing those dimensions. The problem with too much screen time, there's just a study done at University of Ottawa with 4,500 kids. And what they did was they looked at the amount of time kids spent with their screens, and they tested them cognitively in terms of their functioning. And kids who spend more than 2 hours a day on the screen did worse on the cognitive testing function they did. And that doesn't even go to talk about the interpersonal skills and those aspects of it. So it's really about balance, and our kids sort of coming to a point where they balance their in-person time and screen time.
Yeah. Kathryn, yeah.
I'd love to have Steve comment on this. So when I have suffered in my life massively from anxiety, massively. And I've had to learn how to cope with it. One of the things that I've learned that's relevant to machine learning is that my mind thinks that the best way to cope with my anxiety is to reason my way through a problem, and it is the worst thing in the world. The best thing in the world to do is to notice the little voices are coming up, and then to basically act like what we call in machine learning a supervised learning algorithm. And supervised learning means, is it a cat or is it a dog? And the humans have come in and they've said cat, 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 and the machine picks up and it learns how to associate patterns to cat. So when you're meditating, focusing on stress, you basically you do mindfulness and you sort of impose this goal of what it is you might be, and you sort of calm yourself down. And all of that also, at least in the adult context, and I'd love to understand if it's the same in the child psychology context, relates to uncertainty. The hardest thing in life is to make a choice where you can't imagine what the future world looks like. When you're in work and things are stable, you do your job and you solve problems, and it's not that hard. It actually can be pretty fun to use our brains to solve problems. It is mind-bogglingly difficult to make a hard choice about your life. Should I marry this guy or that guy? Do I take this job or that guy? Because as we think about it like machine learning, it's not precise. There's this whole distribution of possibility. And our brains are like, what do I do with this? And so for me, the big thing would be, that's actually really relevant for AI because we're shifting to this realm of how do we negotiate possibilities? How do we represent them with computers? How do we make decisions to render something precise when it could be uncertain? So I think for me, God, building out a tool, an AI that could help provide some imaginary, help people imagine their potential future in a way that could mitigate their anxiety would be an incredibly powerful and wellness providing thing. But I don't know, and Steve, I'll pose this to you. Do children, is it that same grappling with uncertainty that causes stress in children, or are stress responses in developmental psychology different from those in adult psychology?
First of all, thank you for sharing your personal story. That really is really neat and helpful. Steve, this ties into the next question, and that would be, Psychology Foundation of Canada is interested in mental wellness that way. How can AI help us, and how is it helping us now?
Okay, so there's so many examples of where AI can be helpful and useful in dealing with kids. And I thought about this, I knew this would come up this morning. And one of them, I thought I'd bring an example. One that really got me excited was this. Now this looks like a Fitbit.
Yeah.
This was developed by a company in North Carolina called Revibe.
Yeah.
And it's designed to help kids with attention problems. Wow. And what they do is they wear this, and instead of the teacher now would say, Johnny, you're not paying attention, this thing would prompt the kid during the day, and all the data goes up into the cloud, into a database, and you learn to analyze the kid's ability to attend. The kid responds with 1 or 2 taps, whether they're paying attention or not, during the course of the class. Now, I got excited about this because they did some pilot studies with it, and they found that 80% of the kids that use this in their classroom increase their attention significantly by 20 to 35%.
Over what period of time? Can you just
over a period of 3 months.
3 months.
3 months. Wow. And so the data was really good, and the data feeds instantly online to parents and to teachers, so they know as the day goes on how well their kid's doing today in school, how much of the time are they paying attention. And not only that, when they did the pilot study, the kids didn't want to give it back.
Really?
Which shows you that, unlike medication, which they're not too happy about, not that this will replace medication necessarily, but this is the kind of thing that AI is sort of assisting in and helping us with dealing with kids. All this information is used in algorithms and helps manipulate the amount of times, the frequency, the patterns of the attention, and the kids love it because they have some control over it.
Can I have it?
There you go.
When you factor in those other factors that you talked about, like the screen time study that you referenced in Ottawa, so you roll all of that up into that. Again, the algorithms that can can be predictive or can make parents aware of, okay, these are all the factors that are going. We know that there was issues in class today. We know that there's too much screen. We know all of these things. Here's a strategy. Here's how you intervene. Here's how you help your child through that, and so you're not missing those cues. That's one thing. That's one thing that computers do very, very well is picks up patterns, right? You can see things that humans can't necessarily see, and so when you kind of throw all of that into the equation, you're able to kind of more precisely give the proper, I guess, and to call it prescription is sounds a bit too medical, but the proper kind of instructions on how to deal with that specific issue at that specific time in the right moment.
Right. Thank you, Kathryn. Anything to add to that?
Yeah, what caught my attention there is thinking about the tendencies to become addicted to screens. There's reasons why that's the case. I have my phone on grayscale. So people look at my iPhone and they're like, what is this, right? Because it's all gray. And the reason is that this is coming from a community of us who are sort of in favor of ethical use of technology and human values-based adoption of technology. I don't want my brain to be hacked by bright green and bright red, right? It's deep down in the lizard sections of our brain, we're sort of being pulled to these colors. And a lot of the very successful companies out of Silicon Valley have honed their tools and optimized them to hack our attention because they make money off of that, right? So the longer we stay on screen on some of the social media networks, the more advertising revenue the companies can accrue. And what's great right now is that we're starting to realize some of the negative consequences that these design choices can have on society. And so going back to the whole thing of like what the risks of the technology are, we think about, oh my God, the super intelligent machines are going to take over. No, today we have designed tools to hack our attention. And we don't need to do that. It's possible for us to lobby for a different value set as we think about the use of technology. We need to be aware. We need to have conversations like this so that, like Dr. Stein can teach people working in my field, hey, this is how the brain works. This is where your emotions might be able to be manipulated. Keep that in mind as you're developing your tools. And then from our side, we can say, okay, do we optimize for reading and attention? Do we optimize for staying online for as long as possible, right? There's choices that we can make that lead to a different type of experience for the end users of the technology. And I think what's really great about today is that we're forced to come together and have these interdisciplinary discussions and are thinking about what our values are, how our bodies and brains work as the manipulatable beings that they are, and then how we can come together to use artificial intelligence and make thoughtful choices about how we want to engage with the technology so that is furthering the society we want, as opposed to our feeling sort of behest to Frankenstein coming out of our control, let's say.
Thank you. Russ, in the room here, there are mainly adults, all right? And we're stressed by what's happening in terms of being overwhelmed by the jargon, whether it's Watson bots, whatever it may be, feeling inadequate maybe to keep up with the rapid pace of change. What do you advise for adults in the room to adapt to all of this that's happening and overwhelming us?
That's a great question. I think Kathryn had a good point about, sometimes we focus on the wrong things when it comes to that, our visions of the future or really what's happening. There are impacts on society. There will be impacts on, a lot of people in this room in terms of how their jobs will shift or how, they have to parent or whatever it is they have to do. I think again, I would give certain advice that I would give my own kids around, again, being constant learners. Always kind of try to have an open mind about, what's happening, the benefits, but be aware of what those risks are to manage all of that. I think there are coping strategies around, screen time that, Kathryn made a good one. I never heard that, going to grayscale as a way to kind of, stop that addiction from taking root. But there are all kinds of ways where you can just have, kind of safe zones where you don't have technology, that where you're actually talking to your kids. But then ultimately, I think when it comes to your own exposure to technology, I think you can't ignore it. You have to really acknowledge and be aware of what's happening, and try to understand it in a way that kind of I guess is relevant for you.
Right. Anything to add, Steve or Kathryn?
Yeah, I'd really want to reinforce the awareness. I mean, you're going to hear about so many technologies and so many things popping up that alone can make you anxious. Yeah. Just keep in mind that they're not all going to stick. Some of them are going to just be thrown out there and disappear, and some will be more sticky than others. They'll be around with us. But just be aware and don't get anxious about it. Just sort of watch them go by.
Go with the flow.
Go with the flow. I'm sure you're all happy with your Google Maps and some of the other ones that really don't disrupt your life in that way, but they're meant to help you.
Right. Kathryn, anything you want to say?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is actually the shift to artificial intelligence is a big one, and it's going to take some time for the infrastructure and traditional companies to catch up to what's technically possible, akin to electricity. Electricity was invented in the late 19th century, and it took until the 1930s for it to actually, for companies to be electrified and take full advantage of the new technology. And I think it's interesting in thinking about this in the context of developmental psychology, because kids come in and their brains are plastic and open to the world and malleable, and they're able to sort of have this intuitive sense of the capabilities of technologies that'll often just dumbfound us old adults. And I think they're tools. It's applied mathematics, and what's interesting is that it's applied mathematics that is reflecting us in very interesting ways. And I think again, akin to what Russ said, it's not necessarily man versus machine. It's more, as we have this new set of tools that's reflecting us in ways that we haven't really considered before. What might that lead to?
Right, and that brings us to a question, what you mentioned about the malleable brain. Steve, children's brains are growing and developing, yet we're learning in such different ways than we did just 20, 30 years ago. What effect is that having with brain plasticity, et cetera, on a child's brain?
Well, it really affects the way they learn and the way they interact with the world. I mean, it still amazes me, my 2-year-old, now 3-year-old granddaughter was working on an iPad before she was working with books or any other things, and can swipe those screens and pick what she wants. Yeah. So their whole brain is going to be different. The way they see the world is different than the way we did. We grew up in front of a TV set where you had to get up and turn the channels, right? And their whole brain is wired completely.
There were 3 channels growing up. Remember that?
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
We shouldn't age ourselves.
There were televisions though, right?
It's funny you mentioned that, the iPad example, because I think now, and I was talking to somebody recently where their milestones were, at 9 months walking, at 13 months it was, first words, and then at 14 months it was my first Alexa command, right? So the kid was the baby, the toddler was literally able to talk to Alexa at that age. I know it's really hard for Alexa to understand kids, but that was a milestone for this parent, that their kid could actually ask Alexa for something.
Kathryn.
One of the things I think that really needs to change, and this relates to sort of how we work in the startup community, this is not particular to AI, but it's sort of how startups work these days, is just education, the structure of pedagogy to promote faster learning. We learn best by failing, and at least when I went to school, the classroom was not designed to celebrate failure. It was designed to celebrate getting an A on the test. And if it wasn't the Mozartian stroke of genius at first pass, you were dumb, right? You were punished. And so I think that is the worst. It's the worst approach to cognitive learning development. And sort of engaging with these learning algorithms, they're not yet at the point where they know where they're wrong and they are great teachers to us. The AI is not smart enough to be a great teacher yet. There is massive work going into making it become a better teacher. They know how to learn, they don't know how to teach. If we can get to the point where it can teach and we can incorporate a shift in our thinking about learning and curriculum to help students feel comfortable failing so that they can learn faster, oh my God, it would be massive for society.
That's true, yeah. So just for a final question here, putting on your Lost in Space or Star Trek hat, looking ahead 10 years, what might you envisage? We don't know, there are many options. What do you think though? When you're lying in bed at night thinking, what can happen here?
Well, again, I mean, I think for us, voice is going to be kind of much more prevalent in the future, and not even in 10 years, in a handful of years. So people are just going to ask for things. So the future of, again, Star Trek specifically, where it's computer or whatever, I think that's going to be, we're just going to talk to things. We're going to ask for things, and so there are implications for that. But I mean, that's not 10 years away. That's 5, 6 years away, or longer, or shorter.
Well, thank you, Kathryn. What would you leave us with?
What would I leave us with? So I would say, I mean, just sort of the leitmotif behind all of this, I am a big fan of our getting rid of the unhelpful trappings as it relates to emotional intelligence, stress, and all sorts of mental health issues. I think a coming to Jesus as a society to recognize that that we are kind of like machines too, and that there need not be stigmas associated with them is incredibly powerful. And I think that our engagement with learning algorithms can be a useful prod to help us approach mental health issues in a more constructive way.
Thank you, Steve.
So 20 years ago, we had no iPhones, no such thing as that. And now everyone in this room has an iPhone, and it reaches all stratum of society. So where are we going? Where's that going to lead us? Well, I think in the future, we're all going to have our own little personal assistant. And we're going to use this personal assistant to help us with all kinds of functions from day to day, from when to get up, from where my appointments are, where I'm going. That's where I think we're going to be. We're all going to have these things that help us get through our days and make our days happier.
So really, AI will enhance our humanity in that sense, or if we handle it correctly in terms of value systems, et cetera. And
Overall, there's always a
Overall,
dark
yeah.
side. There's always a shadow side to everything we do. I mean, we're
Yes.
not going to get away from that. But I think on the
Saw that
bigger
episode of
picture,
Black Mirror, it's terrifying.
yeah. But on the bigger picture,
We all are.
the bigger picture, we're going to talk about the helpfulness, the
Right.
assistance that we get in our day-to-day living.
Right, that's the message here today, and this has been a wonderfully fascinating and informative discussion with some brilliant minds up here. You know, it looks like we're looking for the blend of AI and EI. Maybe we're really looking at something called artificial intelligence. Don't know. Okay. All right, well, thank you. A big thank you to the panel here. Thank you.
So Dan, Kathryn, Russ and Steve, thank you so much for such an interesting conversation. I think we're all going to rethink both the AI and EI intersection thanks to a lot of the ideas that you have introduced, and especially rethinking what the concerns are, because yeah, I'm one of those people that thinks that they're going to take over the world. I have not been asking the right questions, so thank you for enlightening us in that regard. And I'm sure people realize, even though this seems like a very nice casual panel, make no mistake, the panelists connected with us about 6 months ago, did we start? And over this time, they've been communicating with each other to refine the conversation to one that would be appropriate for this audience and in a nice, concise amount of time. So these are 4 really busy people, and we really appreciate the effort you've put into today. And we do want to have a small acknowledgement, and I see that, oh yes, here they are, just as promised. So thank you very much. And just before I hand these out, for those people that are interested in the silent auction, just a reminder that it is closing at 10 to 9, so if you've got your eye on something, please do keep the bidding going up. But I'll have a few more words. I just wanted to hand out this thank you. So Kathryn, thank you very much. A small intro.
Oh, thank you.
Great.
Wow.
Thank you very much.
thank you
Thanks. Thank you so much.
Thank you. What a great panel. So on behalf of the Psychology Foundation, I, again, would like to thank you for coming. As many of you know, and as I think was said earlier, the Breakfast for Champions is the Foundation's biggest fundraiser of the year. As Leanne noted in her compelling remarks, the Foundation is committed to prevention by nurturing resilience in children, and it has a long and demonstrable track record of success. My husband, George, who's over here, oh, no, he's over there. But my husband, George, and I support the foundation, and that's rooted in my long-term involvement in the area of at-risk youth and their families. By the time the organizations that I volunteer with connect with families and youth, the troubles and challenges are already quite far down the road. Frequently in the situations where I'm working with families and kids, they lament that they did not previously have the types of skills that the Psychology Foundation promotes. So George and I value that the tools developed by the foundation can be applied early with the goal to minimizing or preventing challenges down the line. George and I believe that a donation to the foundation is an investment in prevention and an investment in healthy, thriving youth, and we support the foundation so it can extend its reach to positively impact as many children and as many families as possible. So as we conclude this year's breakfast, I invite you to join with George and I in supporting the foundation with a donation to whatever degree you're able. As you may have noticed, very conveniently, there's a donation card and a very handy pen with each donation card at each place. And if you are able to make a donation, please fill out a card and deposit it in one of the 3 donation baskets being held. You'll see that there's some great volunteers at the back with the signage and a basket, and you can just put your card in there and we would gratefully receive that. For those folks who have bid or are going to be bidding for a final bid on the silent auction, when the silent auction wraps up, visit your favorite items. There will be a very clear card on the item to show who the successful bidder was. You can just take that note to the registration table where you can pay. We've got lots of people ready to take your payment, and they will give you your item. And with that, we bring the breakfast to a close. So enjoy the remainder of your day. Thank you so much for your attendance and support. We ask you to mention to our various donors, be it silent auction or otherwise, that you saw them here, and we appreciated their participation. And we look forward to seeing you all again, and some extra friends, so this will grow next year. So thank you again.
We're not quite finished. Many of you young girls, when you were very young, wanted to be a flower girl, but I'm the flower boy.
You're the flower boy.
Come on. So I want to give these to Leanne. I want to thank the panel. Super job. Thank you all for coming. You're all wonderful. The big job we're trying to do is make this Canada the healthiest one in the world. We have a lot of help. Leanne, thanks for everything you've done today.
Thank you so much, Eric.
Look at the camera here. Look at the camera here.
You're sweet. Thanks.
Like they used to shine. And the thrill is gone when you